Okay, so if you're watching this in 2026, you had paper one yesterday. If you're studying accounts, obviously, which is, why would you be watching it else? I hope it went well. It did sound like it was a challenging paper, so if you're stressed about that, I would say the boundaries are going to shift a little bit closer to 2024, which was a fairly difficult paper one as well. It had statement of cash flows, slightly different layout statement of cash flows. This one seems to have had adjustments. I've not seen the paper, but the essays this year sound like they're a little bit awkward. And so some people worried about that. He's got to focus on paper two. Everyone found paper one challenging. Paper two generally more accessible, and when paper one has been more challenging before, paper two is a little bit does feel a little bit nicer. I don't think it actually means anything. I don't think that's what the examiners are trying to do. It's just that paper two, a lot of people do prefer, and the marks bear that out. Anyway, one of the topics that's only come up once, and that I always say will come up, so surely this year is going to be it, is limiting factors. So we can call it limiting factors, we can call it scarce resources, whichever way we want to call it. Now, this could be a numerical question. When it did come up previously, it was a 14-mark question calculating the maximum profit to deal with the shortage. But for me, it could be a 25 as well. You could have a limited production plan, and a business could be looking at whether they look for the most profitable mix or they focus on other areas, so other alternatives, which could also link into a 6-marker, so like finding a different supplier for its materials, getting temporary labour, so agency staff if it was a labour shortage, or just outsourcing a certain amount of production. So just think about what you would write if that was the context, because I actually think that's quite an interesting essay if it did come up. Anyway, if you have limiting factors numerical, it's a step by step, and it's not too bad. But just think about the stages. So this is, yes, it was created by AI. I'm not going to create this. There might be a couple of American spellings which will annoy me. But the first thing you do is you're going to identify what the limiting factor is. Now, usually in the question it will tell you. The only question that's ever come up, it just said there was a certain amount of material and there wasn't enough for production. But there's nothing stopping them telling you the amount of labour, the amount of materials you need per unit. And the first step is you've got to identify what the limiting factor is. So you work out the total amount of materials you need for production, the total amount of labour hours you need for production, and then you go, oh, well, actually, we've got enough of one, but not enough of the other. That's the limiting factor. You won't have more than one limiting factor. That does come up on AAT level 4, but that's a way away for some of you if you're looking to carry on your studies. So once you've got your limiting factor, you then look at contribution per unit or CPU. Absolutely vital in paper two that you're talking about contribution in essays and that you know what it is because it can come up in calculations all the time. Hopefully at this stage you know that selling price takeaway variable cost is contribution per unit. So if you've got one of these questions, if you've been told the limiting factor, the first mark will be for calculating the contribution per unit for each particular product. Pay close attention to whether they got fixed costs because obviously they're not included in CPU and lots of students do use those. Once you've got the next bit is calculate the limiting factor per unit. You may not have been given the amount of kilograms per unit or the amount of hours per unit, whatever the limiting factor might be. And so it may be the case you're going to have to calculate it. So for instance, the question that came up before was materials. And if they said it was £24 worth of material, and then you look elsewhere in the question, it says it's £2 per kilo, you do 24 divided by 2 and you know it's 12 kilograms for that particular unit. And so there'll be a mark for calculating the amount of material or labour hours for each particular product. It could be machine hours, by the way. It generally is materials and labour, but there's nothing to say it isn't machine hours. You've got a shortage of machine hours and you're trying to maximise use of your machines to generate profit. Once you've done that, you then divide your contribution per unit that you calculated in two by the amount of materials or hours to get a contribution per limiting factor. So that's an extra mark now because what you're trying to do is maximize profit. So you need to maximize the contribution per that limiting factor. So one product could be using double the amount of material than another one. And so actually, whilst the CPU might be higher, the amount per limiting factor would be significantly lower. The next mark would be for ranking them in order. So prioritize, there's your first American spelling that I've noticed anyway, prioritize the products. Just put in your question, very clearly listed, 1 to, well, how many products there were, 1 to 4, whatever it might be. Number 1 is the highest. The amount of times that people rank the lowest to highest, I don't understand. You start with the highest. So the highest contribution per limiting factor goes number 1, then number 2 and 3 and so on. And nice and straightforward. But you get a mark for doing that, so don't forget to do it. Once you've done that, depending on the nature of the question, so it might be prepare a production plan, which if it is, you've only got to go to step 6. And step 6 is then to produce in line with that ranking. So you produce as much as you can of the product that's number 1. And we actually have to go into the second limiting factor then. I said there's not two limiting factors, but this is slightly different. Usually businesses will only produce as much as they can sell. So the second limiting factor, the normal limiting factor for any business, is sales demand. So the number one, you'll produce as much as you can sell. Then keep a note as how much limited resource that you're using by doing that. So if it's 2 kilograms per unit, you multiply that by the amount of units produced. Then we go to number 2, number 3, and whatever the last one is, whether it's the third or fourth product, you'll have a certain amount of material left or a certain amount of hours left. You won't be able to produce all of them. What you're then going to have to do is, with the amount of remaining hours or material overall, divide that by the hours per unit or the materials per unit, and then that will tell you the actual production of the lowest ranked product. There's usually a few marks for that. Sometimes it's a mark per, well, to be fair, it's come up once, so it did come up before. There was a mark per product where you calculate the production plan. Once you've done that, the question could ask you to calculate the profit. What's the most profitable mix? So if you do that for each of the products, so from the production plan, multiply those by the CPU. So that's number 2, not contribution limiting factor, by the CPU, so the contribution per unit. So then you multiply that out, and remembering the last one obviously is going to be on the lowest production, but either way you're just going to multiply it by CPU, add them up, and that's the total contribution that you've made for that production mix. The key extra bit is obviously you've got to take off fixed costs to work out profit, but remember, fixed costs do not change with output. So if you were just told fixed costs, just take them off. If you were told fixed cost per unit, the lowest ranked item, you're still going to need to multiply fixed cost per unit by the original demand, because no matter if you sell that many or if you sell the new amount, it will be the same. Every other product will be the same, because obviously your production demand will be, production will be the same as sales demand, is what I mean. But just keep an eye on that, and then take that new fixed cost figure away from contribution, and you've got profit. Surely this is coming up this year, or this is very useful to people in future years. But okay, and then there's potential for 6 markers as to what we could do with this production plan. Like I said at the beginning of the video, outsourcing, different supplier, temporary staff, whatever it might be, and you could be weighing up the pros and cons. But remember, the key thing with the 6 marker: balance, argue for and against something, think of a counter argument, use some figures from your production plan or your profit, and make a judgment. Okay, good luck.